This
Mrs.
conference will now be recorded.
Mrs. Jamie Hasty. Jamie Hasty is a vice president with SESCO Management Consultants in Bristol, Tennessee, and Richmond, Virginia. Jamie graduated from East Tennessee State University with a BBA in Human Resources Management. Her professional affiliations include the Society for Human Resource Management and various state chambers of commerce. Jamie is a generalist consultant in all areas of human resource management with specialties in affirmative action, policy development, wage and hour accounting, employment regulation compliance, training and development, compensation and performance management systems, client representation with state and federal agencies like the Department of Labor, employee satisfaction assessments, executive screening and placement, and general human resources consulting. The variety of client engagements and daily interaction over the course of Jamie's career enables her to provide practical, helpful, and legal advice and support to clients in all industries throughout the country. She regularly conducts management training programs for clients and serves as a guest speaker for state and national associations and chambers of commerce. Jamie is a certified trainer for Vital Learning Corporation and SESCO Leadership Institute. She is also a John C. Maxwell coach, trainer, teacher, and speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jamie Hasty.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon, or it may be morning if you're on the West Coast. It's a pleasure to be back. It's been a while. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about developing your workforce, and I hate to use the term post-COVID because we're back in the thick of it, I feel like. But the reality is that the dynamic and the culture and the workforce has changed for a variety of reasons, and whether COVID pushed us over in that direction, but we still got some vastly different aspects when we look at just the workforce in general. So a little bit about SESCO. We are the oldest HR consulting firm in the country. As a reminder, because you are association members, you do have free telephone and email consulting through SESCO as a member benefit, so feel free to use that. A little bit about myself. Jessica read a very kind biography about me, but I'm kind of in the thick of it day in and day out. We've got clients throughout the entire country in all industries, including obviously state and national trade associations and their members. So I see and hear a lot, and it's kind of crazy out there. So today, here are the three main kind of categories I want to hit on, and we can dig into them a little bit more in detail. And as Jessica mentioned, feel free to use the chat feature for Q&A. We'll do that at the end, but if there's anything glaring that pops up, she may kindly interrupt me and we can address it. Or if you have questions that are completely unrelated to this and a different topic, you still ask them, not a problem whatsoever. So I do want to talk a little bit about organizational culture and why that is so important, especially as we continue to kind of navigate all of this COVID stuff, as we are continuing to open back up. There are still parts of the country where there are restrictions in place, in terms of operating and which businesses and so on and so forth. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's the truth. So culture is going to be really, really important as we kind of move forward and kind of dig ourselves out of this the last year and a half. The second piece I want to focus on is really how are we going to cultivate our HR policies and our practices. Having a strong HR understanding as well as solid policy and procedures in place is going to make everybody's life so much easier with compliance and a number of things, and just helping employees understand what's expected of them. And that, that also kind of plays into the culture aspect as well. And then last but not least, let's talk a little bit about recruitment and retention, kind of what we're seeing. I'd love to hear input on what's working for you and also what you feel like isn't working. because again, every little region, every state, every city or pocket has their own unique situations and struggles and successes. And, you know, if we were talking about 2019 hiring, it was highly competitive back then. You know, you couldn't hire them fast enough. And now it's like employers were desperate with positions being open and needing to fill those. And, you know, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but the reality is we've got a lot of people out there and we've got a lot of open positions, and employers are very frustrated that they can't fill those positions. So let's talk about recruitment, but also retention. How do we keep them? It's one thing to get them in the door, but how do we keep them? So that's our game plan for today. I'm going to roll right in. So culture. One of the number one issues that we find in every organization relates to communication. So when we are talking about kind of taking a pulse of the organization, what I often will recommend is that every few years you do an employee opinion survey. It should be a statistical survey that's valid and reliable. And you should be looking at a number of categories. And so, you know, good and bad, Likert scale, so on and so forth, forced yes or no. Don't create your own that just gets into a hot mess. And also, a lot of times employees feel like if it's coming from internal, it's an internal survey, that it may not be as confidential as they prefer, and you may not necessarily get the real opinion, the real perception of the organization at that point. But first things first is communication. When you do those surveys, or if I were to walk into an organization tomorrow and sit down with a variety of people, all the way from senior level all the way down to frontline workers, communication will come up as an issue, whether that is a perceived issue or a legitimate issue. And all too often it is, we think we're being clear, or the message was sent through the wrong channel of communication. Follow-up tends to be one of those aspects that we really see flagged a lot of times in culture, as you know, that the managers don't follow up, or you know, they don't follow through on what they say they're going to do. So communication is really going to be a huge focus as we kind of work through some of these cultural pieces. There has to be consistent effort from top all the way down to the bottom. So a lot of times you hear communicate from the top down. Well, really, I also want you to consider communication from the bottom up. Okay, it needs to be a two-way street. Employees need to feel like they are heard and they are valued, and that they, at this point, are still a top priority for you. Yes, we have clients. Yes, we have customers and vendors and a product and a service to provide. However, if we don't have staff, we can't provide those products and services to those clients and vendors. So employee communication and making sure that we are focusing on engagement, frequent communication, and leadership culture is going to be really, really important. So some things that you can dig into is really employee engagement. Employee reward systems, I mentioned the employee opinion survey, but keep in mind that a lot of times motivation and morale are used synonymously in conversation, and they're not synonymous. You can have a highly motivated workforce with really poor morale, or you can have good morale and a lack of motivation or production from your team. So we'll dig a little bit more into engagement and some other rewards and ways to connect with them, but employee engagement should be a key focus, and that communication surrounding here's what we're going to do for you is going to also need to be important. Another piece that I think is really vital as you work to cultivate your workforce is that there needs to be transparent and frequent communication. At this point, over communicating is not a bad idea. Employees still are very unclear as to what the next 30 days, 2 weeks, 6 months, 1 year looks like from now. We are seeing increase in numbers. We are seeing changes in regulations and how we are forced to operate. You know, there's just a lot going on in the world, right? And so what's really, really important for leadership is that we keep employees in the know. We've got to be as transparent as possible about here's where we're at, here's where we're going, here's our plan to get there. And oh, by the way, this is all very much subject to change, and we are going to communicate it as timely as possible. You see, a lot of times what we find is that employees feel like they're not kept in the loop until well after the fact, or the change has already been decided and they've been told, you know, a week or two later. So transparent and frequent communication is important. A couple of ways you can do that is by having crucial conversations, whether that be one-on-one or within the department. You know, sit down as a leader. Here's where I'm at. Here's what I'm doing well with. Here's what I'm personally struggling with as a leader with regard to, you know, business operations or communication or connecting with you all, whatever it may be. But you have to dig down to and foster relationships with your employees and have those good one-on-ones and spend time with them. Where is their head at? What are they excited about? What are they struggling with? And again, I know this is very fundamental, but those frequent communications and touch points with you, whether it be in person or even virtually, because I think we've transitioned a lot to virtual, is more important moving forward than what it was 3 months ago or even 6 months ago, okay? You know, again, things might be changing drastically within, you know, how we operate in scheduling and in person versus work from home and all of these things. So you want to keep them in the loop as to what's going on or what potentially could happen, or here's what our plan is, okay, within reason. Obviously, you know, you don't have to over communicate or share things that are not going to impact their day to day. You know, I kind of take it back to what I refer to as the line of sight. Why does the organization exist? What are our main core values, our focuses? And here's where your role is within that. And here's what my commitment is to you as a leader. And here's what I need you to commit to as an employee. And it's that you got to let me know how you're feeling, where you're at, what you need, those sorts of things. And I'm also going to commit to you that I'm going to check in and make sure that you have what you need. So the transparency will be very key as you work to boost culture or maintain a good culture. And then the last piece to that is you have to have a commitment to your culture by leadership. A lot of times I see leaders, you know, talk about, oh, we've got this employer of choice, or we've got such a great culture and this and that, and we don't allow X, Y, and Z to occur within the organization. And you turn around and that leader is not walking the walk and talking the talk, okay? So lead by example. Don't ask your staff to do anything that you're not willing to do. And if you're going to ask them to communicate or share their thoughts and ideas and opinions with you, then you also need to do the same with them. So the other pieces I would encourage you to revisit, and I know many of you already do it, is be present. Do your rounds, do your checkpoints, carve out the time. They need to see that you are there and that you're supportive. And that goes for the entire management team. You know, closed door type of stuff isn't going to work anymore, especially with the upcoming uncertainty. So they need to feel like they have a present leader and a leader that's going to go to bat for them. And that's super, super important as we continue to navigate the rest of 2021. So 5 communication trends for 21 that I'm going to hit on. First and foremost, transparency and trust. In order to get employees to commit to you as a leader and to the organization, you have to establish trust, and that takes time, right? But a lot of what I talk about in leadership is getting to know your people with regard to their personality profile, because it helps you manage them and lead them better, but also sharing with them what your style is, what your personality style is. So if you haven't done personality profile testing, check out DISC, D-I-S-C. I love it. It's one of my favorites. It's very much in layman's terms, but it's a great team building piece, as well as it helps establish kind of that relationship and trust between you and the individual employee when you kind of sit down and you figure out, oh, that's why you do what you do, or that's why you respond the way that you respond when I ask you to do something, because we're on complete opposite spectrums. So transparency and trust are really going to help you kind of reshape your culture. A couple of things. It's going to also help boost employee engagement. Employees now, especially with different generations, we've got multiple generations in the workplace right now. With certain groups, they want to feel like there's a sense of belonging, that there's a greater purpose, that, again, with the line of sight, this is my role and the big picture. And if I do this, then X, Y, and Z can happen. And if I don't do this, then A, B, C will happen. There's that family sense or that sense of belonging that's really, really important to a lot of workers right now. And when we have better trust in our leadership, then we fully commit to the organization. Typically our customers are treated with higher level services, and overall people tend to be happier. So the other piece that I will notice that we're seeing in communication trends is social conscience. So whether that be what the organization's stance is on vaccinations or COVID, or social issues that are going on within the nation or within your respective locality, a lot of employees are looking for that sort of communication to go out to both employees as well as external clients and vendors. Jessica and I were actually just talking about virtual training, that you're going to continue to see the ongoing push and need for virtual team meetings, especially if you've got folks within various offices, various departments work from home or spread out throughout the region. Virtual is here to stay. In fact, a lot of employees like it, but also keep in mind that there are folks that are kind of virtualed out, so to speak. They're over the Zooms, they're over the Teams, they're over the GoToWebinars, because they need that in-person piece. So again, goes back to knowing your team member and knowing what they need, where's their head at. If you are a type of person that does better in a actual physical office environment, perhaps then you work on trying to do in-person one-on-ones versus virtual team meetings. Again, it's always a blend and a flex, and you just try to meet people where they are within reason. Number 2, you will see a convergence of high tech and high touch. There is a need for contactless engagement beyond traditional workplace and workplace settings. So, a lot of people are looking for new systems or software or ways of staying in touch that don't actually involve physically being around one another, as these social distancing guidelines continue to be tweaked day in and day out by OSHA and CDC. With communications, like I said, employees are craving information. They want to know more now than ever what's going on, what's the plan, where are we headed, what are we going to do, sort of thing. So make sure that we're not withholding that information and that you have a true communication plan for every department as well as the organization as a whole. Leadership needs to sit down and think about, all right, we've got these initiatives going on, or this product rollout, or this big, contract we just landed. How are we going to roll this out to the teams and kind of explain what their parts are? So you may be looking at AI linked strategies, gauging employee sentiment, and looking for other ways to kind of blend high tech with high touch without it being actual in person. So that's a trend number 2. Trend number 3 are expectations from employees on health and ethics messaging. Again, as we are bombarded with a number of changes, I feel like almost on the daily, employees are much more aware and conscious about health-related topics. Okay, so they want to know: was I exposed at work? Was I exposed at this conference? Or what do I need to do if I have to travel for work? So you need to kind of get familiar with those pieces. They also want to see nice, clear, simple, layman's term, succinct information. So a lot of times what happens when we communicate is we put too much in the message, and the whole purpose of it is kind of lost, right? So use that KISS method to keep it simple and short. So that can also help. Ethics are really, really important. Another piece that we see with ethics and health and just general communication that's trending this year is that a lot of organizations as well as leaders are not just communicating with the employee themselves, they're actually sending familial communications as well. So that the family unit as a whole is also in the know as to, here's what our plan is as, ABC organization in dealing with the ever-changing world that we're living in today. So number 4 is going to be listening, which is difficult, and involving employees more in decision making. So again, going back to kind of looking at engagement and employee opinion surveys, that's your active listening. That is the perfect way to get a pulse on how employees feel about a variety of categories and actually take that information to heart. When making decisions that are going to impact the business and or key staff members or departments as a whole, try to involve employees in the decision-making process within reason. Formulate some sort of committee or team, or work with that department director or manager to figure out what's going to work. But the important thing to remember is employees want to have a say in decisions that impact their work. And that is becoming even more apparent than it always has been. So the other piece that I will say is try to give them options, okay? Whether it be in person or virtual, or you call it virtual, or, things that they need to grow and develop or gain strength in. We don't want to be tone deaf as an organization, right? So employees love options, as do most individuals just in general. Make sure that they have options and that they know that there are options there for kind of the day-to-day, that will help kind of meet the masses as well. And then employees are looking for purpose-led organization, meaning it's not just, yes, I work for SESCO Management and we offer X, Y, and Z in terms of products or services. They want to know the bigger why behind things. What else do we offer? What type of social or community involvement do we have? What type of growth and development can I gain here? They're looking for purpose, and they want to be involved in defining that purpose. And we started to see that towards the end of, 2018 and moving forward, but it has become much more prevalent in 2021 as we kind of move forward. And then number 5, there has to be an increased partnership between senior leadership with HR and marketing, okay? And this kind of digs a little bit into recruitment and retention, and we'll focus on that more, but employee recognition is crucial. When I look at the thousands of surveys that I've done over my time with SESCO, what we have found is that the employee recognition piece, or recognition from their leader, can be a very low scoring category for many employees or for the organization as a whole. But you've also got this complete shift in the fact that employees want work-life balance. When things shut down last year, employees were forced to kind of work from home or do flexible work schedules, and they figured out, and a lot of organizations figured out, oh, okay, work from home actually can work, and employees can be just as productive. For some, not all. Some employees just are not productive at working at home whatsoever, but employees were happier and healthier, and their well-being and their mental health was, for some, better. And so employee health and well-being is really, really important right now. And that's going to need to be a continued focus for HR and leadership as to how do we keep them engaged and bring that work-life balance, and make it work for our organization, because not every organization can do work from home. There are certain positions, certain departments that may be able to work from home or flex scheduling, and others cannot. So that health and well-being, as well as, I would also say, check with your medical insurance and make sure that you have an employee assistance program for mental health support, and that we're doing some sort of educational outreach as well on what benefit the company offers, paid leave, medical, dental, all of those things. The other piece that we are seeing is companies are investing more in recognition programs. Not just, oh, here's a plaque for your 10-year sort of anniversary, like legitimate recognition programs. And it goes back to employees want to feel like they have a say in things. Ask employees what type of recognition they want. And then listen to that and work that into an actual recognition program. Again, I mentioned that employees at companies want to see that our company, our organization is taking social issues and stands on those. And a lot of employees are only wanting to work now or are more inclined to work at organizations that have communicated what their social stance is compared to others that did not. That is not always the case. I'm not saying it is good or bad. It's just a statistical survey that has been, shared in the HR world. And then more importantly, as we kind of, expand on that social issue piece, I'm not saying that you should or you shouldn't. You've got to make an educated decision as to what works for your company and what level of risk you want to assume with that social stance, because there's risk in everything that we do in business. But regardless of whether you communicate or take a stand or make a decision on how the company wants to respond to a certain social issue, that is a personal leadership choice. However, your management team and your leadership team needs to be coached on how to respond. They need to be trained on, if somebody goes on social media and is blasting you because you did X, Y, or Z, or you said this in support of that, or you didn't say anything at all, here's how you should respond, okay? They need the support to know how to accurately respond so that it is not creating a larger issue than what the feedback would have been initially, okay? So 6 ways you can refresh your culture with recognition. As people are returning to the office, and they have been for a while, try to do some sort of like welcome back, whether in a positive, memorable way. It could be bringing in lunch. It could be small little $5 gift cards to Starbucks. It could be a number of things, but celebrate the return. Highly controversial for some, but as CDC and OSHA have just recently, within the last few days, again tweaked their guidelines, some companies, especially when we have very customer-facing organizations, are giving out incentives for vaccination status. Okay, it's a personal choice. I'm not getting into that conversation. That there are ways that you can incentivize, whether that be through extra PTO or a bonus or points towards your recognition program, that employers are working into their procedures to help encourage vaccination. Again, personal choice. There are always religious and medical exemptions, and you should not be ever sharing somebody's vaccination status with anybody because that is protected health information. But if you end up doing some sort of monetary incentive or bonus to those who are vaccinated, please reach out to SESCO, because there are some wage and hour regulations that you need to be mindful of when you do incentive bonuses with non-exempt individuals. So I will leave that there. You can also recognize safety practices. You all have safety protocols and OSHA guidelines in place. Again, we've got this hyper focus on not just the COVID piece, but the regular safety piece as well. And so you can do appreciation, you can do call outs, you can do all sorts of recognition regarding safety practices, again, through monetary or non-monetary ways that employees really do seem to enjoy kind of those programs. The other piece that I will say is you want to make sure that with performance management and recognition programs, and as we kind of get back into whatever the new normal may be, that we are establishing and reinforcing our goals and our values. Okay. If we have changed kind of the line of sight or tweaked our mission or our vision or our strategic plan or business plan for that matter, again, communicate those things. And this is a great way for leadership to kind of realign expectations with regard to behaviors that we expect, and to reinforce those as well. You also are going to want to encourage appreciation and helping our teams reconnect. Again, a lot of us have been working remotely or have been on staggered shift schedules to where your team may not have all been together for a while. Some people love work from home, and others really need that office or that office environment. So employees want to feel connected. So peer-to-peer recognition is a great way to foster reconnection. And there are a ton of different ways that you can do that. You can do shout outs, you can do, employee of the week, high fives, whatever. But look at peer-to-peer recognition as well. And then celebrating our milestones and successes together, going back to recognition, but company anniversaries, new product launches, employee birthdays, hitting goals, communicate those things. Life has been so heavy for so long that I feel like employees are really craving the good stuff. Yes, they need to know the bad stuff, and they need to know the stuff that is kind of neutral, but also make sure that we are sharing as much of the good as we possibly can as well. Thank you goes a long way, and that recognition and appreciation really can help reinforce retention as well. So questions about that before I jump into any sort of compliance piece. If you have a question, don't forget you can use your chat feature for that, okay? So some compliance updates, and I feel like this is probably changed since yesterday when I tweaked it again, but as a reminder, state and federal laws, states are enacting their own paid COVID leaves, their own paid family leaves, so all the way down to even some, localities. So make sure that you are in the know with that. If you are unclear, reach out to SESCO. We are happy to kind of provide you that information as well. But, when last year was here, we had the Families First coronavirus. We also had March of this year, the American Rescue Plan Act, which gave the option for employers to extend that paid COVID leave, right? So you can still take the tax credit through the end of next month. They did expand reasons related to vaccination. And actually, I just read an article earlier this morning that the IRS and Treasury Department and also expanded that you can take the paid COVID leave to care for an immediate family member who has received the vaccine and who is recovering from the vaccine. So it's tax credit money. It ends on September 30th. If you have any questions about that, happy to address those. And it applies to all employers. Anybody can take it. So OSHA, ETS, that's the Emergency Temporary Standards related to the pandemic, has been tweaked 500 million different times, most of which applies to healthcare organizations. But there are some best practices in there regarding social distancing. CDC actually just came out yesterday and tweaked what you do with masking and social distancing of somebody that's been vaccinated and exposed to somebody that was unvaccinated. So it gets a little squirrely, okay? The hard part is that the recommendations change almost weekly, if not every few days. And we expect that to continue at least through the fall. So if you have questions regarding what the most updated CDC guidelines are, or what do I do with masking policies, this is where my business is, feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to kind of walk through all of the options with you. I mean, because we've got people from all over, so we can't get too specific in certain things, but make sure that your policies and procedures are updated appropriately to reflect the ever-changing CDC and OSHA guidelines. With regard to also your state, what requirements they have. So I live and work here in Richmond, Virginia, and Virginia had their own OSHA safety standards that were in effect that were really, really restrictive, more restrictive than what the federal guidelines were. And then they kind of repealed some of them and tweaked them. So a lot of states are also doing that, New York, California, so on and so forth. So make sure that you're just kind of in the know there. For any of my large employers that are tracking insurance eligibility for purposes of healthcare reform, the 30-hour rule, ongoing, time off regarding, FCRA from last year, or even the American Rescue Plan Act of this year is gonna kind of tweak some of those calculations. So as a reminder, any time that is paid, whether that be through disability or FCRA or the Rescue Act, counts as hours of work for purposes of ACA. So the other thing that I'm hearing a lot still from employers all over is regarding unemployment and the frustration of unemployment being approved for people that quit or were fired for cause, that work is available, so on and so forth, and how do we challenge it? So check with your unemployment commission if you feel. A lot of them now have places where you can go and file online if you believe that somebody is fraudulently accepting unemployment. I know that a lot of states are still overburdened with unemployment claims, and that's why employers are not getting the proper paperwork to complete and send back and having the hearings like we normally would. So check with that. So legal update wise, the big things really are relating OSHA and CDC. Nothing big is really down the pike with regard to like pandemic pieces. So. Now, what do we do with all of these things? So, we've got to communicate, we've got to look at recognition, we've got to do engagement. But how do we stay on top of all this? I mean, it's so much to where, leaders and HR people are still, their heads are spinning. So here's what I will tell you. I would encourage you to challenge your paid leave policies. One, because a lot of states, again, are doing, paid sick leave, paid family leave, and there's accruals and so on and so forth. So if you haven't had your handbook reviewed, again, you can have that reviewed by us. Do that to make sure it's compliant with your state, but also does it make sense for where we're at now as an organization? I actually just had a client that called and they said, historically, we've never offered PTO within the first 6 months of employment or first year of employment. That's just such an antiquated process now and a policy now. People aren't going to want to work for a company where they have no paid time off within the first year of employment. Again, it goes back to that work-life balance, right? So make sure that your company paid leave policies, one, are affordable. It makes sense for the culture and for your workforce, but that it's also compliant with state and local laws. Also, continue to challenge flex work schedules. The ability to telework. Do we have the appropriate tools and resources made available to our employees that can or potentially can telework? As the variant is popping up, as numbers are popping up, as you see on the news with hospitals running out of beds and all of these things, there is a probability that certain areas may kind of ask that companies go back to staggering shifts or working from home again, if possible. So make sure that you are preparing for that. And most of us were kind of forced to do that last year anyways. So you probably have all of those things in place. But again, refreshing our memories, does it still make sense? Can we tweak it to make it better for our employees, but also for our customers and clients? The other piece that I will say I've seen a lot of employers fall to the wayside on in the last year is performance management. And it's hard, especially if you have remote workers, to manage, so to speak, when they're not there with you. But evaluations, your coaching sessions, your one-on-ones are still so important. Employees want to know how they are doing. You cannot fuss as a leader about so-and-so is not producing or their performance is poor if we have not provided them with that constructive ongoing feedback. So make sure that we are staying on top of evaluations annually, that you're doing coaching sessions, you're doing weekly touch points, in person as well as for those that are virtual. And that more importantly, we are not letting the training and development piece fall to the wayside. Okay, workforce development is only as good as the training and resources that you are providing and pumping into the staff. If you invest in your people, they will invest in you. Okay. Again, you know, I think a lot of people are kind of virtualed out, but with so many virtual opportunities for training, and it's much more affordable than what it was before for depending on the topic, you know, make sure that they're getting the training and development that they need, and that you're, again, asking them what type of training and development do you feel like you need or would like to see, and providing them a say in that piece. Last but not least, I want to hit a little bit on the post-pandemic workforce and development. So a recent survey just came out. It's interesting because it said nearly 3 million women have dropped out of the labor force. And that I mentioned earlier, you know, people are really starting to reevaluate this work-life balance. And you're seeing a lot of people say, I'm just not going to go back. Or if it shuts down again, I'm just going to tender my resignation because it's too much. So, you know, you got a lot of low-wage jobs moving around. You've got leaders, you all are, you know, scrambling to find people that, or people that are willing to take jobs with, you know, competitive benefits and pay and all of these things. And it's a hot mess out there these days. So it can be incredibly frustrating for a leader. So some things that I want you to think about is preempt the job packing problem. I want you to review the job description. When Susie was hired, here's the job description that she signed and her job duties. Now, sit down with Susie. Susie, what additional things are you doing? And flesh those out. Because let's be real, they're always doing more than what the job description says. And, you know, within the last year and a half, we've tacked on more because we've, you know, lost some people or other people have stepped up. So we want to make sure that the job descriptions are updated, they're reflective of what the job requires and what the job is doing right now. And more importantly, is the current work or volume of work still appropriate for where we're at right now as a company? And B, is it doable long-term? Burnout is real, my friend. And what we are seeing is employees are so burnt out, they're just throwing in the towel and saying, I'm done. Okay. So, you know, get with your managers, get with the employees that are doing the job, and make sure that the job description is updated and that it is reflective. And if we need to shuffle some things around, shuffle some things around. But you want to try to avoid the dumping of additional duties and the burnout as much as you can. The other thing that we are continuing to see be a really, really driving force is compensation. And I know you guys know that. If you are giving people additional responsibilities, it's not unfair for them to expect that they're going to get additional compensation. Again, the more that they do it and the longer that they do it without any sort of financial incentive, you know, that burnout or that frustration may become a real situation. So you might have to have some uncomfortable conversations. I always suggest that you have a formal compensation labor grade system in place with ranges and rules. It helps leaders and it helps managers just, you know, kind of be able to explain, here's the position, here's what it's valued internally as well as externally in the market, here's what your range is. But if you haven't done a salary survey or gone to the market lately, go, because it can be dramatically different now than what it was 6 months or a year ago. So the other things that people are looking at to recruit rather and retain, obviously sign-on bonuses, additional reimbursements for car, cell phone, laptop, mileage. They are throwing everything in the kitchen sink at these job postings, and even with the current employees to recruit and retain. The other thing that I will say is with bonuses, again, there are some wage and hour regulations that may impact that. So please don't just give a bonus without checking with a SESCO consultant or your employment attorney so that you fully understand how non-discretionary bonuses impact overtime or regular rate calculations. We talked a lot about remote work, but you know, people are really, really looking for that work flexibility. So, you know, if you can provide remote work or there are positions that can do that, that's great. Make sure that it's advertised that way or give the current employees that option. Some things that you can ask yourself in the organization: does this type of work have to be conducted on premise? If we are bringing employees back, what are we trying to accomplish by having them return? Is it simply just so that they're in person? Does that make sense? You know, a lot of organizations actually, I have some clients that 100% got rid of their physical office space and are all 100% remote. Now, that doesn't work for every organization or every industry, but it's just interesting because they were able to cut that overhead and turn around and roll it back into additional benefits and compensation for their staff members. And their production and their motivation and morale went through the roof. So there are things there for you. So I know I threw a lot at you in about an hour or so. What type of, what might I be able to answer for you? What questions might you have? Jessica, do we have any questions? See any? I don't see any. I will wait for Jessica to respond.
I apologize. I was on mute as I was saying all of that. we do not have any questions at this point. Again, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat box and Jamie can address them. In the meantime, I do just want to say thank you, Jamie, for your presentation and all of the insight that you always bring to us. We greatly appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. Again, as a reminder, ACIL has access to SESCO for telephone and email consulting. It's a member benefit. Utilize it. You can call the corporate office at 423-764-4127. I will give you my direct number. It's 804-931-6281. And myself or any of the other SESCO consultants can help you out with that as you need it. And Jessica can also send you a copy of the PowerPoint as
Yes.
well as my contact information if you all need it as well. But Jessica, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to be with you guys.
Thank you. And again, just a reminder, this presentation will be posted on ACIL's website, hopefully by the end of the day today, if not by first thing in the morning. So feel free to reference back to it and let us know if you have any questions and we can get them to Jamie.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Thank you very much, Jamie.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Talk to you guys soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.